Cast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to our monthly Employment First webinar. This is Stacy Jones, Employment Services Coordinator with DDA. This is our second in a three-part webinar series made possible through Maryland's collaboration with the Employment First State Leadership Mentor Program. Really quickly, before we begin the webinar, I just want to go over a few housekeeping things about this webinar. All participants are in listen-only mode. There are two options for listening. Sometimes throughout the webinar, people will make comments that they're having trouble hearing. So if you are having trouble, maybe try switching to if you're calling in, maybe try to connect via your computer. And if you're in via your computer, try to connect via the telephone by using the button on your webinar panel. On the right side of the screen, you'll see a control panel, and in the handout section of the control panel, you're able to download a copy of this PowerPoint, and the PowerPoint will be emailed to all participants for anybody that's using the phone today. And as always, we are recording this webinar, and we will send the link in the follow-up email that will go out next week to everybody that registered. Along with being sent in the email, the webinar will be archived and will be loaded on our website. If you have questions throughout the webinar, please feel free to type them in the question box in the panel. I will be monitoring the question box as we go through, and we'll answer the questions at a time in the webinar that it makes the most sense. So joining us again today is subject matter expert Sara Murphy. And for those of you that didn't have a chance to listen in on Sara's first webinar in this series back in April, don't worry. You can go back to DDA's website. We actually have a page that's linked to our Employment First page that includes all of our archived webinars. If you go to that archived webinar page, at the very top, you'll see a link that says Community Day Supports Part 1. And you'll be able to actually watch the webinar as well as download copies of the materials that Sara talked about. So all of the materials will be there. And as we record this one and next month's webinar, they'll all be together because we think it's really important to make these resources available for the future. So enough housekeeping. I'm going to hand things right over to Sara, who's calling in from California. She's going to continue her wonderful description of community-based day services. So Sara, you can take it away from here.
Thank you, and welcome back, everyone, or welcome if this is your first one. So very, very excited to be here again. And today, what I wanted to do was just to further our conversation about how to use community day services in a skill-building way and in a meaningful way for individuals in your programs. And we, as if people were not here on the last call, we have a program in California. I work for Transcend Inc., and our organization does research and policy advising on a federal and state level, but also technical assistance and training. And one of the things that we realized was that in order to really do quality technical assistance and training, we had to walk the walk and had to do direct service. So we established the program that I run in San Francisco, which is WorkLink, 21 years ago, and we set it up using best practice and just looking at, how can we create a person-driven, individualized service program that really gets at employment and a meaningful life. And it's evolved over those 21 years, and we are starting to see just amazing things with people who have been in the program, many of them needing less and less services as they build confidence and skills in the community. Other ones, of course, continue to need support and will for their lifetime. But it's I think what you're going to find as you get into your local communities, just how wonderful the job is that we have. So today, what I wanted to do, the first one was more on kind of an overview of meaningful community-based day services, and this one, I wanted to get a little deeper in the weeds on setting meaningful goals. How do you determine what a person needs to do or needs to learn, and then how do you measure that in community settings? because it's nebulous and it's different for everyone. And how do in a center-based program that focuses on work or social recreational stuff, it's pretty clear what you're measuring or pretty clear what you're doing. And when you kind of get out into the community and start really individualizing schedules, they all look different. So people's goals and dreams and what they're into really does change. So it is a little hard to really figure out what to teach and how to measure that success. So that's why I wanted to have today's webinar focus on that, just to give people a little idea on how do you individualize that and how do you record people's progress. So again, today the agenda is really to look at individualizing services and determining meaningful goals. How do you figure out what someone needs to learn in a community-based setting, and how do you really focus in on kind of encouraging community-based employment and building skills towards that. The other things that we're going to be looking at is, the critical skills needed to be independent in the community, and what kinds of things are important as an adult to be able to function in community-based settings. So we'll talk a little bit about those in a little more detail. And then also ways to create connections in our communities. And one of the things I wanted to look at was the differences between communities. So, a rural community is very different than an urban community, and they both have their challenges. So we'll talk a little bit about what those are today and how to be creative around the community-based activities that you're developing in either. Then I also wanted to look at, teaching. How do you teach in community-based settings very quickly? We use a lot of positive instructional strategies and systematic instruction, and we'll touch very briefly on that today. And the last piece will be data collection and really measuring success, how do you know people are making progress in community settings, and how do you, as a direct service person, record what people are doing. So again, just to take a little bit of a step back, what we're really looking to create with these community-based services is individualized services, and to really get at, what do people want to learn, and what do they need to in order to be successful and to achieve their goals. Again, not having a cookie cutter, everyone's going to go through this curriculum. One of the things that we see people often do is they make community-based services into school. So I want to caution you on that and charge you with not coming up with a curriculum or something that's really cookie cutter and that you're going to punch people through, but to really look at how to build services to order and how to really make sure that they're person-centered and person-driven. So really looking at who the person is that you're working with, and what their dreams and aspirations are, and then the big thing that you need to ask yourself is how do we help them to achieve these goals, whatever they may be. So a big important skill for people who are in direct service is to really learn to listen, and not to lead, not to move people into things that that we want them to do. Obviously there are some things that one will have to learn or have to do in order to be successful, and that's something that's obviously a piece of what we're hoping to teach them. But really looking at who they are, what are their interests and passions, and then how do you help them to achieve that. And then what happens is if you do that, the services are meaningful, and they are really geared towards what that person is all about and what they really want to learn. So again, the definition, and I one of the things I tell my staff is I'm going to tattoo it on their arm, is if we can find space on some of their arms, but that full meaning. It's full of meaning, and what does that mean is it's significant, and it's significant to the person or society, or it's purposeful, it's outcome oriented, Why are we doing this? And then the last one is valued. So it's either, you know, something that that person is really interested in, or a passion of theirs, something that they truly value, or something that's valued by society. So really, you know, having something that's, you know, meaningful. And this definition is one of the things that anything we do, any service we're going to, anything we're going to put in someone's schedule, anything that we're going to develop, any resource that we're going to do, is we look at why, and you know, and it's got to be meaningful for someone, and you know, what can we teach there? It's not, we're not being opportunistic. We're not just going out and this is close to where we are, we're going to go do that. You know, it's very much focused on you know, what can we teach there, and why would we go there? So we really start by looking at what, you know, what people want in life. So, you know, employment obviously is a huge one. You know, we hang our hat, and obviously the name of our program is WorkLink, and we started out with just employment, and and that's all we offered. We had supported employment services, and what we found was that that was not enough. People want more to life than just a job, but the cornerstone of a meaningful life is definitely employment, for many reasons, and one of it's, you know, financially. You know, to have enough money to do anything is really important. And then the other piece of it is that dignity that comes from being a productive, valued citizen. So that self-worth is just absolutely, you know, an imperative for any adult services program to focus on. The other thing that people really want is they want friends. They want, you know, they want to see their family. They want engagement in their community. All of those things are critical. And if we forget about that, you know, we really are only addressing a tiny portion of someone's service needs. So really looking at encouraging engagement in the community, and how do you get together with your friends, and especially for intellectual and developmentally disabled adults, you know, it can be very hard. They have a lot of trouble initiating those contacts and kind of managing those contacts, because there's a lot of judgment. There's a lot of, you know, they got to reach out. You got to figure out with your friend what you're going to do, where you're going to go, how much it's going to cost. All of that stuff is really complex for someone to manage and pull off. So one of the things that we really focus on is that piece, is how do you get together with your friends? How do you call them up? How do you use your cell phone? You know, making sure that their cell phone numbers are all in each other's phones so that they can call each other, and trying to keep our services out of the picture, you know, or build ourselves out of the picture. So once the skills are built, you know, we try to encourage people to do things independently, and we talked a little bit about ways to do that in the last one. And we will actually be talking a little bit more, I think, in the next one too, about how to do that. The other thing that people want is, you know, a happy home, kind of a sanctuary that reflects who they are and what they're all about. So we go into people's residential situations and try to help them learn to be as independent or self-reliant in at home, and then also, you know, does it feel like a home? Does it feel like their home? So we help them to kind of, you know, plant a garden at home, or, you know, get a pet, or, you know, whatever it is, whatever, you know, paint their room their favorite color and put some pictures up on the wall, and you know, invite their friends over so that they can play video games or watch the football game or whatever it is, so that their home feels like a home and not just a house. The other thing we look at is health. Again, you know, how do community-based services are very different than shelter-based services, and they can be physically taxing. So, you know, one of the things we really look at is stamina, endurance, and coordination. So, you know, making sure that people can get on a bus and walk down the street and you know, physically do the things that they need to in a community setting. It's not, you know, they're not picked up in a van, brought to a place. They don't sit all day. You know, it's really, really different. So we have to really look at health and stamina and endurance for people in regards to community-based services. choices and options. Now that's the easy one, because the world has so many opportunities. So giving people choices and options is never, it shouldn't be a challenge, and it may be in some rural areas. You may not have the resources, the public resources, or the availability of things. So we'll talk a little bit today about how do you create choices and options for people. And then the other thing that people want in life is to be valued, productive citizens, as I said earlier, that's where volunteering and giving back comes in. And we have seen people who, we start out with volunteering for employability reasons and teaching them employment skills and getting something on their resume. And when they go to work, we say to them, you don't have to volunteer anymore. That was to build skills. You're now employed. We'll build those skills at your job site now, so you don't have to do volunteering anymore. And what we see is that people say, no, I still want to do that. And it's because I think what they're doing is a great thing, and I want to help. So, it's something that, we then, the reason they volunteer shifts from learning skills that are going to take them someplace to actually giving back and being, a valued member of that team. The other thing that we look at is, freedom and independence. How do we fade our services? How do we make sure that our services are that we're the connector, but we're not the connection, so that people can really do things on their own eventually without us, is the goal. So how do we make sure that we build in that freedom and that independence into everything we do? So one of the things we look at is, what do people need to learn? And there's a wide variety of things. It might be social skills, it might be soft skills, it might be, working teamwork, listening to direction from people other than a staff person. It might be money counting, it might be hygiene, or computer skills and other things. So there's, you have to really kind of look at what does it take, what is it what's important to know in the community, and that's, again, the goals that we set for people. So setting meaningful goals, we really look at what the person that we start with, what are the person's dreams and goals. And one of the things that I presented the last time was our positive personal profile, which is the tool that really gets at that. It really does help us to figure out, what people's passions are. It really helps us to figure out, kind of what their 3 to 5 year goals are. And then what we can do is say, what do we need to do? What do they need to learn in order to get there? How can we make that happen for them? So we use that profile, and then we also have that community skills assessment that we use to kind of look at, what can they do in the community, and what are important, what we think, what we kind of went around and kind of came up with, what did we think community skills entailed, and what are some common things that people need to be able to do to be successful. So we help people to kind of evaluate where they're at in that, and that tool, that community skills assessment tool, demonstrates. That's the one that has kind of that 1 to 5 ranking. And again, what we do is we look at, where are the 1s and 2s? We don't really have to teach the 4s and 5s. They're well on their way to being independent in those skills. But we look at, what are the 1s and the 2s, and how can we teach those? So those are the goals. And then what we look for is, where in the community would we be able to teach this? And really look at how to build new skills and improve the old ones. So we look at speed and accuracy. So maybe they can do something, but maybe they can't do it quickly or accurately. Maybe they can use a computer, but they can't type very fast. So we would look at, can we get them into kind of a keyboarding class where they're going to get a little practice in typing accurately and quickly. So really looking at how can we improve and really get people's skills up to kind of a competitive level, or to a necessary level. The other thing that we look at setting goals around is for ways to increase independence and self-reliance. So maybe they know how to use their cell phone, but they don't call their friends, and they don't set up or initiate setting up going to a movie. So we do things like what we refer to as kind of date night and Saturday suggestions, and then help people. We also have what we call a blow your mind board, where people come in and put things that they just dream of doing. So it has things on there like just everything from going to Disneyland to what else is on there right now? Taking a dance class, things like that. So that we can kind of look at, can we make that happen for people, and get them to kind of start thinking about, there are a lot of opportunities, there's a lot of things to do, and we're kind of exploring the world a little bit and helping them to really kind of feel confident to go out and to do things on their own and without services and a program to kind of marshal it and make it happen. So those are some really important goals as well. The other piece of what we do is the connections within the community. How can we create significant connections, not just going out and hanging out in a park or going shopping, but how can we create friendships with people in their neighborhoods or in community sites that are important to them, and really work on socializing and saying hi to people and building those friendships, because we're not just looking at integration. We just don't want people to be integrated where they're standing next to somebody. We want them to be included and valued and participating to a great degree in the community. So that requires kind of the connections and the friendships. So we work on building that. And then of course soft skills. Many of the people that we work with are have been in programs where the bar wasn't very high, shall we say. They could get away with acting in a manner that is not adult-like or socially appropriate. So one of the things that we really work on is soft skills, and making sure that people have those in their pockets so that they can be successful and that they can participate in appropriate ways in the community. So soft skills are a huge component of our day services. So hard skills, again, what we're looking at is physical skills. As I mentioned earlier, that kind of stamina and endurance and range of motion and flexibility and coordination, all of those things are incredibly important. And especially if you're in the world, there are opportunities all the time to teach that, everything from, getting on and off a bus, walking down a street, so we look at how can we really, taking a yoga class, whatever it is. So really looking at how do we help people to be, physically fit enough so that they can participate in the world. The other thing we look at on the hard skills side is kind of math and reading. What kind of math and reading does one have to do in community settings? And everything from reading bus numbers to so you get on the right bus, to addresses on buildings, and realizing one side of the street's even, one side of the street's odd. How do you find different places? So we work on those kinds of things, reading street signs and reading materials that are important in the community. And math, of course, money skills, all that stuff is really critical. We also look at tech skills. This being the Bay Area, you can't do anything without it being on your phone. So we work with people on getting and using a cell phone, and then also, the internet to do research about, what's going on this weekend, what can you do for fun, and then also tech skills, around computer use. And as I said, so, that typing speed, typing accuracy, all of that is really important. Learning how to use a mouse. Many of them come in and say that they know how to use a computer, and it's always been set up for them, so they really don't understand how to turn one on on, or to find the file that they want, or get to YouTube to watch their cat videos. So we work with them on, how do you do that? And then what's appropriate and what's not appropriate with technology. So when is it okay to call your friends, and at midnight on a Tuesday night is not a good time to make a phone call, or the 6 o'clock on Sunday that we get often. So it's important to really teach people not the ethics and around these devices as well. And then also just making sure that that safety is there too, so that they're not giving people their numbers or passwords and things like that. So making sure that they understand that how to protect themselves on computers and their phones. The other thing, navigating and traveling in the community, as I kind of mentioned before, is how do you get someplace, and the problem solving, like what do you do when you're lost? If you're lost, how do you find help, and who do you call, and kind of teaching them that lifeline stuff. And then also vocational skills, how to use various tools, how to use the computer skills, of course, come into that as well. So lots of things around hard skills that we look at when we're setting goals. So physical stamina, again, so we really look at, general stamina and kind of range of motion, really making sure that we're not doing for someone. So, we have people who are so used to having a one-on-one aid that, they don't do for themselves, and they wait for somebody to do it for them. So really helping them to learn to feed themselves, or brush their own teeth, or brush their own hair, may be a goal. Coordination, again, walking on uneven ground might be a good goal, or carrying things, like carrying a tray with your food from the place when you're eating lunch, and not spilling it. Using an elliptical machine at a gym, that's a good one, or a rowing machine, or a bicycle machine. Again, maybe getting on and off a bus, going up and down stairs, or getting on and off an escalator. People don't really think about that, but some people it is difficult and a scary thing. So that might be the goal, is the individual will be able to safely manage a staircase in the community. And then another one too is transferring in and out of a chair, getting in and out of a car, bathrooms, whatever it is. Really helping people to be as independent as possible. We also look at fine motor skills, so dressing, so buttoning a shirt, zipping a coat, tying a shoe, eating, pouring a cup of juice, or cutting using a silverware. Or just literally being able to reach out and feed yourself. Cheerios, putting Cheerios on a table. Driving a wheelchair is another very, very complex thing. Helping people to really understand how to navigate curb cuts safely, and crossing streets and stuff like that. But also, really physically driving. We have a lot of people who, take down cubicles and things like that when they first start. So, we work with them on, making sure they're not hitting walls, and that they're holding doors off of their chairs so that the doors don't get all scuffed up and scarred. Another fine motor skill is using a vending machine, just putting change into a vending machine and punching the buttons. So that's something that you can look at for teaching physical skills. Again, numbers and reading, telling time. We have a lot of people who have a watch but don't ever look at it, and that becomes problematic when they're at work. But we also, one of the things that we've started to do is we've started to have time cards for the volunteer jobs, so that they sign in and sign out, so that they are looking at their watch and they're understanding when I'm working or when I'm volunteering. This is different than when I'm out at the gym, or out kind of, having a good time with my friends. So, we work on time telling and time management through the volunteer jobs that we do. Also, the number of things I talked earlier, using an elevator, teaching them that, when it says suite 670, the first number is the floor, so what number are you going to push, so that they can use an elevator. And then what's the ground floor? What does that usually look like, and things like that. So using numbers in that way. Bus numbers and reading schedules. Obviously, telephone numbers are a great one. So when an individual is, we do group services for these small groups, so it's 3 to 4 individuals in a group. And when someone's late, instead of the community instructor calling them, we sick one of their friends on them. So we have one of the people in the group call the person and say, you're late. So this gives that individual an opportunity to not only use their cell phone and to call their friend, but also to, their friends learn to listen to them. And it's kind of that peer-to-peer, teaching them that it's not nice to stand up your friends, and when you say you're going to be someplace, you need to be someplace. So, all of that stuff is part of it. SKU numbers again, so teaching people how to read expiration dates. We try to get volunteer jobs where there's some opportunity to do some distribution or some kind of skill building around using expiration dates or processing items based on their numbers, so that people have an opportunity to learn that skill, because it can be a very important employment skill for many individuals. And as I said, the expiration dates. And the last one, of course, is the big one, money. So we look at money, and we'll talk specifically about that. So reading all of the things that we have listed over there. So newspapers and current events, making sure that if you're going to be a citizen of the world, that you understand, what's going on in the world and what's happening in your community and who people are. And and then also, kind of reading to find information and things to do, what's on at the movie theaters. Does any of that sound fun or good or interesting to you? Or, using it to figure out what's going on the weekend in the city, what's going on. Also, what the weather is, how are you going to have to dress? Are you going to have to bring an umbrella? All of those things. So we have a little current events group that we kind of, well, it's not really a group, but, if we're sitting, we meet and people are at a meeting spot, we'll have them either pull out their phones, or which is what everyone does, or some of them have iPads that they use, or sometimes we have them find there are some newspapers still left. We have them find that, and they talk about current events while they're waiting for the group to arrive. Then reading street signs again, schedules and checklists. We use a lot of those. The cooking group, they have recipes that people are charged with reading. And then also we sometimes give them directions, very simply written directions that we make them follow. Maps are also something that you can try. Maps are kind of hard. It's kind of an advanced skill. But it's also something that I think is really important. And if you use kind of a GPS based app on your phone and having them kind of follow when it says turn left, do they turn left? That kind of stuff. Money and budgeting skills. And this is a really important one, especially if people are going to work. We look at can they count money? Can they count? If we had a young woman in our program whose sister gave her $20 every day, which was I wish I had a sister like that, is what I say. But she would give her $20, and one day she came into the program and she said, my sister didn't give me my lunch money. She didn't give me my $20 bill. I don't have money for lunch. And we said, well, I said to her, well, bring your backpack over here. Let's look and see. Do you don't have any money? And she said, no, I don't. She didn't give me my $20. I don't have any money. And I opened her backpack, and there was $435 in her backpack. There were no 20s, but she had $435. So helping her to learn that there's more than one way to make a $20 bill. And then also working on worth, what does it cost? She would go out and she'd spend $20 on lunch. And so we worked with her on budgeting, and we worked with her sister on, let's give her a set amount and let's not, so that she learns that if I blow it on this day, I'm not going to be able to, eat the next day. So we work on, that kind of budgeting. The other thing that we work on is dollar over, which is teaching people to recognize the decimal point in price tag, and helping them to understand, how many dollars do you need to give that person, and then one more to cover the 96 cents. So we teach them that dollar over technique so that they are able to pay and don't have to walk up and just open their wallets or have a $20 bill. And they know that if they give that $20 bill, that's going to cover everything they think. And making sure that they understand, just how much things cost, and then how to pay for them if they don't have a $20 bill. Budgeting, again, as I said, what we want to do is teach people to not to spend their money just because they have their money and they have this money in their pocket, but helping them to kind of look at, what important things do they want to do, and how much do those cost. So we look at, we have a few people who are way into WWF, the wrestling stuff, and they come around every once in a while. So we use the price of a SmackDown ticket to explain to them, they're coming back in October and you need to have $42 saved for your tickets. So how are you going to do that? And help them to learn to save, and help them to learn to put aside some money so that they have some cash on hand to do the fun stuff that they want. We also teach them to read paychecks and understand what, when I work an hour, how much do I make? And when I call in sick, how much money am I going to lose? All of those things are very, very important in helping them to read their paycheck and understand, how much they're earning. And then what that buys them too. The worth thing, we have people who want to live in an apartment by themselves, and in the Bay Area, that's very cost prohibitive. So, we work with them on understanding, in order to have that apartment, you would have to work, this many hours, so that they start to reflect and see, what it takes to have an apartment or have a cell phone. So we work with them on bills, and other things, and then making sure that they understand, if you have an apartment, then you also have to pay for electricity and, PG&E. What does that look like? And how much is that a month? And helping them to understand, what a personal budget is, and what their personal budget is. We also work on banking. Many of the people in our program are kind of unbanked because they don't have, or they're signed on to their parents' account. So we work with them on understanding what banking's all about, and of course, savings and credit, and helping them to understand that, it's not a good deal to go buy a sofa on credit, and then, you end up paying 3 times for it, and helping them to understand, how to really what credit really means. The other thing that we look at, again, is soft skills and employability, because it's, our whole goal is to get people into work. So helping them to really look at, exploring and discovery at first, and then we work on, the soft skills and the employability skills such as these. So I talked earlier about time management, and prioritizing responsibilities is one of the things. We need to do these 3 things. What do you think is the most important one? And then have them kind of think about these things. And instead of us and our community instructors setting people up and marshaling the whole thing, we make them do it. So here, they need us to sort this. How are we going to do that? We're at Project Open Hand, and Mario comes over, who's the volunteer coordinator, and he talks to the group and says, today you're going to do onions. You have to, peel the onions and throw out the ones that are rotten, and bag them up in bags of 10. And the community instructor just looks at everyone and says, okay, how do we do that? And they as a team have to kind of come up with that and figure out how to do that. So making those judgments and really kind of setting themselves up and figuring out how they're going to do tasks. And then when they're done, what do you need to do? You need to go and tell Mario, we're done, what's next? So it's not someone, doing that for them, because what we see is when people get jobs, they're so used to being set up and marshaled, and that they don't initiate these things. And it's important that we realize that in job settings, people don't stand over people and watch them work and set them up. So we need to teach them to do that themselves, and to make those judgments, and and help them to learn to prioritize their responsibilities. And we teach them those phrases: "Got to get the job done." You know, can I help with that? All of those things. Problem solving, I think I talked a little bit about our Let's Get Lost program, where we really help them to, we take them out and actually get them lost, and then help them to, figure out how do you problem solve your way out of this. The other thing that we do is the community instructors, once someone knows how to do something, the community instructors start breaking things and messing things up, and creating trouble. I don't know how many of you have seen what I think it's Nationwide. It's an insurance company, and they've got that guy that comes in and just chaos ensues. So that's what happens later, and our community instructors are kind of charged with really screwing things up, and then having the people kind of fix it and figure out what to do. So it's pretty amusing, because the people in the program will come in and complain about the community instructors being kind of this doofus that doesn't know what's going on and creating all this trouble. And it always kind of makes me laugh. And I said, well, you just got to be patient with them, So that problem solving is really, really important. Communicating and interacting, again, and customer service skills. When someone comes up, drop everything and help them. It's not something that that people are used to doing. In fact, they're used to everybody helping them. So we have to teach them to kind of reach out and be a helper. And then also just communicating and interacting in an appropriate way. So, making sure that they understand their tone, and their voice volume, and what does that sound like, and teaching them. One of the guys in the program was learning to interact, and one of the things that we were working on him was ladies first. He was in the internship program, and he would just bluster into the elevator, and it was Kaiser's code that if you're wearing a lanyard with a Kaiser badge on it, that you are the last person in the elevator, and that you hold the elevator for the patients and the members. So we use that opportunity to teach him to help others, and to hold the door and say, ladies first. And he busted that out in an interview. He jumped in front of myself and the HR director, and grabbed the door and held the door and said, ladies first. And it's what got him his job. So, those kinds of things are really important to teach. So focusing on concentration on task or physical stamina, again, can they get the job done? And really making them proud and building that work ethic around that. I got to get the job done, and I got to do this quickly, whatever it is. So speed and quality, got to do it right. That's not right, or that's not completely what that you got it at 50%. Let's get it at 100. Really showing them that that's not good enough. You have to do it this way and this way. And also kind of that work ethic and motivation and attitude. I am a helper, and I'm being productive, and I'm valued for this, is something that has to be built as well for many people.
Sarah, can I interrupt just 1 second?
Sure.
Because I have a question that I think this might be a good time, and if it's not, you can say if there's a better time, but let me just read this to you. Joanne says, the kinds of detailed work toward independence you are doing is really exciting. How do you handle parents or guardians who want to limit the independence or information that the individual has? For example, a parent who is afraid for their adult child to ride a bus or to have access to their own money in their own independent banking account. And the second part of that, how do you deal with problems among friends in the program? For instance, friends who demand that other individuals give them things or trade things with them. That's a good question.
Well, all of those things have happened. and it's different with everyone, but to kind of reflect on the fear factor with parents around giving them money or a bank account with an ATM card. And of course we've had people who have emptied their bank accounts just by going and getting $20 every 5 minutes. So we work with them on, and that's part of what we're trying to do, is to really teach them those skills and teach them not to abuse them, and to and that's what we make clear to parents is we won't just give them unlimited access until we are sure. We're not just going to have them go out in the community and be on their own until we are 100% sure they know what to do. So with traveling and being out in the community on the bus independently, we had many families. We would get them. And part of what I'm going to show you later is documenting what you're teaching. You're not just winging it. You're not just out there kind of oh, they know how to cross a street. So I'm going to show you in a few minutes about what that can look like. And if you have data that shows your people making progress and getting and being independent. They're doing this 100%. We're not saying a word. They're crossing the street independently. They can do this. And the next step, what we do is we start kind of hiding in the bushes. We fade, and we tell the parents, we're there still, but they think they're by themselves. So we fade slowly, which is the other key to this. Is we don't just dump and run, because you don't want to do that, because that's where things go really AWOL. And I think I talked about the person who was travel trained on the BART system. Maybe I didn't talk about this, but there's a program, not ours, thank God, but there was a program that had a person who was travel trained, and he was on the BART system, which is a regional transit system here in the city, and he missed his stop, and they didn't teach him what to do. If you miss your stop, what do you do? Which is what our Let's Get Lost program does. You missed your stop. We went all the way to Oakland. Now what are we going to have to? What do we do? How do we get back to the city? Who do we call? So this guy didn't know what to do, and he stayed on the train and went all the way to the end of the line where they booted him out. And he didn't know what to do when he got out, so he went and sat on the curb in Lafayette, which is an hour and a half outside of the city. And the BART station agent saw him sitting there, but thought he was just waiting for someone to pick him up. And the BART station agent left for the day, came back the next day, and the guy was still there. And the BART station agent thought maybe he was homeless, so he didn't really do anything that day either. Day 3, the station agent went up, and the guy's there, and he said, oh my God, maybe this guy needs a little water or something. So he took a bottle of water over to this guy, and realized that the young man had disabilities, and was just obviously was mortified that he hadn't done anything sooner. But this guy never went up and said, can you help me? Never went and kind of initiated that. I'm lost. Will you help me? And you can imagine what the family was in the city was. Every police officer in the city was looking for this guy, and nobody knew that he was in Lafayette. So it was really, really important for us when we heard that little story. I was like, none of our people are we ever going to let them go independently, and that's what parents fear. Is that kind of situation, or people getting abused. So we teach them stranger danger. We teach them all of those things. When someone makes you uncomfortable, what do you do? Where can you go to get help? Those are the things that we have to kind of make sure and put in place before we say someone's independent. And then we fade slowly. So we'll be talking about that. You fade very, very slowly. So hiding in the bushes is one of the things. Driving behind the bus is another thing that we've done. So that if people don't get out, you kind of stop the bus and get them out. But it's kind of funny because we trail people, and my community instructors always laugh because they're like, they never turn around. All you need is a giant newspaper, and you just kind of hold it over your face, and they don't see you, and they don't turn around, so you can walk literally 2 steps behind most of them. And it's very, very amusing. But they think that they're alone. They think they're independent, and we can see what they do, and we can correct anything that they're doing that's not copacetic, shall we say. or safe behavior. So, you know, that's it's important to really do that. But the other really important thing is that you have data that you can take to those families, and you can say, this is what we're working on. We are skill building around this. We're not just kind of giving them, you know, unlimited access to a bank account. We're not just, you know, throwing them out in the community. That we're really looking, and we're doing this in a thoughtful, you know, very much instructive way. So we'll talk in a few about that. And if there are, what was the other question? Boy, I'm long-winded.
No, that was good. The other question was, I think you was about friends asking each other for things, trading things, that kind of thing.
Oh yeah. No, we have a few people in the program who take advantage of other people. We have a young woman in the program who has autism, and she'll do anything you say. So we have to really work with her on standing up for herself and self-advocacy, and that's a big piece of what we do is teaching people. You know, when Marcella tells you to give her your French fries, you can share, or you can say, no, I'm sorry, I'm really hungry, get your own. So we have to kind of teach those behaviors to people, and then we also go after people about being a good friend. And we do lots and lots of peer-to-peer stuff. One of the things that we have is we have a consumer advisory council, and we kind of charge them with helping with all sorts of things. One of the, you know, safety awareness. They do a peer-to-peer safety awareness training on, you know, what to do, and if there's a big disaster, they have to come up with that. What would you do? And what, you know, we went and visited the Red Cross, and this July we're going to go to see the disaster. I forgot what they call it, where the city has a where they have where they send everybody out or whatever, so that they understand that there's this system in place, and that there's, you know, that if a huge earthquake happens, what do I do, and where can I go, and who should I look for? You're going to look for the Red Cross, and this is where they're going to be. They're going to be in, you know, Yerba Buena and Dolores Park. So we teach them all of this stuff, and with people, I think the peer-to-peer learning is really strong. One, it makes them leaders, and it makes them advocate strongly for themselves and for their friends. And it also is another set of eyes. So when someone's doing something, you know, and the instructor is not there, this instructor hasn't gotten there or whatever, you know, if someone's doing something that's not appropriate, that they feel like they can stand up and say, you know, stop it, you know, don't do that. We've had people, you know, begging for money in Starbucks, and before the instructor gets there, because they know that, you know, once the instructor gets there, they're not going to do it, right? They're that smart. So you know, it's their peers that have kind of said, you know, it's snitched on him. Danny's begging for money again, you know, and the community instructor said, well, what should you do about that? You should, you know, that's not, you know, Starbucks hates that. What do we need to do? We need to say, Danny, you know, cut it out. So and people do it. So it's that whole kind of teaching them to be good friends and to hold their friends accountable, and to advocate for themselves is a big part of being in the community, and that's a big thing that we teach. So building connections is all about that, you know, making sure that we're not just being in the community, but that we're really looking at inclusion versus integration. So with that, it means more than just going to Starbucks and buying a cup of coffee. What it means is going to the Starbucks in your neighborhood where you can hang out on Saturday and Sunday, and get to know the barista who, you know, is in your neighborhood, or using, you know, the corner store and getting to know that corner store person, so that you get to be seen as you know, this is my neighbor, versus this is a young man with a disability who I don't know, but I see him often. So, you know, what we want to do is really kind of create those opportunities and that sense of community around each one of our people. So what that really requires is that routine opportunity to engage with those people in a meaningful way, because the first time you meet them, they're going to be, you know, they're not going to know how to interact with this person, and the person, you know, that we're serving isn't going to know how to interact with the other person. So what we try to do is our community instructors are kind of charged with making those connections. and helping people to understand, you know, this is so-and-so, and he lives over here, he lives right around the corner, and, you know, just building those friendships and kind of popping those HIPAA bubbles that we put people in with disabilities, but doing it in a way that's safe, making sure that they understand that there are bad people out there, and, you know, you need to be safe, and if you're ever uncomfortable, what are you going to do? You know, all of those things are really important. But it also requires those kind of routine opportunities. The other thing that we see is once people are in their neighborhoods and in their communities, they become part of that community, and you know, people know them, and we have this young woman, Anna, who we refer to as kind of the mayor of the mission, because she literally will walk down the street and she knows everyone because we've done this. She's lived there all her life, and we've made a concerted effort to teach her, you know, everybody's name and for them to know her name. And she has a million friends, and she, you know, when anything does, like there, you know, she lives in kind of in an interesting neighborhood, and there are many people who are homeless and you know, kind of screwed up on drugs and whatever. And one day she was waiting for the bus, and we had schooled her on, you know, if anybody's bothering you, you know, you're going to go into the store, right? Or you're going to do this, and you need to hold your purse tight in front of you, and if anybody comes up, you know, you yell at them. And so, you know, so this guy comes up, and he's, you know, and this is someone who's, you know, she was travel trained, and the last piece of it, you know, we had someone hiding in the bushes, and the person was recording this, and the you know, they were going to show her mother later that she could do this, right? So they're recording her walking down the street, kind of waving to all of her friends, and then everybody calling out, "Hey, Anna, how are you? How's it going? You know, you off to work? Yup, yeah." You know, so this little conversation going on. She gets to the bus stop, and doesn't some, you know, homeless drunk guy come, you know, staggering up to her and start kind of harassing her a little bit. And she did exactly what we taught her. She pulled her purse closer. She moved away from him. She, you know, and so the person was kind of watching from afar, filming it still, and was just about to shut off his phone and go help her. And you know, to kind of, you know, wave the guy off or get rid of him. And doesn't the guy from the dollar store and the taqueria come running out and yelling at the guy, "You get away from Anna! You get away from her! You know, Anna, you is he bothering you? You know," and so they came over and ran these guys off. So, you know, in the light of day, and if you can create that sense of community, people will be safe and looked after and supported, and it doesn't have to be your program and us that does it. They'll be supported by their neighbors and the people in their neighborhood. So that was really telling, and we took that video and showed her mother, and her mother was like, "Okay, I get it. She is supported. She is part of this community. This is her neighborhood. You know, she can go by herself." And she's been going by herself now for 15 years, and we've never had an incident. And you know, and nothing has ever happened to her. So, you know, knock on wood, that nothing ever does. But, you know, that's the dignity of risk. You know, if we keep people cloistered and we're going to pick them up in a van and take them everywhere they go, and they're going to get in this van and they're going to go to this place, and then they're going to get in that van and they're going to go home, nobody ever knows them. And it's a real disservice to them and to the world and to their community that they aren't participating and aren't, you know, part of it. So really look at inclusion and integration, and how do we really create that. And a big part of it is that giving back, playing a valued role. So volunteering and you know, participating in your neighborhood. You know, if there's a cleanup day, making sure that they participate in that, or if, you know, if there's you know, a special event or something, you know, the big carnival happens or whatever it is, you know, or there's a 4th of July parade, how can they participate in helping to organize that and really getting to be known in their community, and become a valued member of it. So playing a valued role is really important, and we'll talk about that. So what connections to make, really kind of starting with, you know, the person's interest and their passion and their personality. What are they all about? And then really looking at my neighbors and my neighborhood and what happens there, and where do people hang out, or what do people do in my community to socialize. and look at all the aspects of a person's life. So really, everything from, do I have things to do at home? Do I know how to live independently at home? Can I take care of myself at home? And then, can I take care of myself in my community? Can I do the things I need to do in the community? And then, work and social recreational as well. So really looking at all aspects of a life and making sure that you're balancing goals around the different aspects and different domains of life, and not forgetting any one of them, because if anyone's missing, their life won't be complete. You're also building social and professional networks, and really looking at who should be in those, and how do we make sure that this person connects with those individuals is a way to look at this. So focusing on the individual's assets and skills, not deficits and labels. This is what happens often as you start, looking at the file and you start looking at what's wrong and what's broken, instead of who they are and what they're all about. So we look at a person's assets and skills and their passions and their interests, and that's what we use to build their scheduled activities and the places they should be going and the things that they should be doing. So if we look at Jeff, one of the guys in the program, if we looked at his file, when he first came into the program, they called him unemployable. He was in a workshop. He had Down syndrome, couldn't take direction, was difficult to understand, couldn't read or write simple words, second grade math, blah, blah, blah. His work experience was during school was at the Dollar Tree and at the Salvation Army processing donations. And then I don't know what he did at the Dollar Tree. I think he was dusting product one hour a week. So he didn't really have an experience that was really meaty or that was really geared towards who he was and what he was about. He also had some physical issues. He had, his heart had some deficits, and he also had leukemia, and had, a significant treatment around it. Was one of those poor people who had to be, in a hospital room for 30 days or whatever. They knocked him way down and built him back up. So he, a big experience in his life. So what we saw when he came in was that he was very outgoing, very gregarious, had a great sense of humor. And we started looking at what does he like to do? What does he love to do? So, musical, singing, dancing, playing his guitar. He loves sports. In fact, he's a sports fanatic. He loves the Warriors and the Giants, and he goes to the gym with his dad and participated in weightlifting and Special Olympics, and still participates in basketball and other things with Special Olympics. The other thing, he takes pride in his Jewish heritage. It's kind of funny because he's not exactly Jewish. His mother was. They don't go to the synagogue or anything, but he is really proud of it, and talks about it all the time, and so his parents find it a little amusing because his father is Catholic and his mother is Jewish, and they don't spiritually they didn't really kind of glom onto one or the other, but he did, and so we were like, okay, so maybe if he wants to be Jewish, maybe we help him be Jewish, and what could that look like? And then, he loves to help other people, and so, we looked at, what can his week look like? We decided to do something around music and around, and KLW is a radio station, and he, we said to him, are you interested in doing something, to help? And it was a radio station that he liked to listen to, so we had him volunteer because it's a public radio station, so you can actually have him. It's a public nonprofit, so you can actually volunteer. So we started him volunteering at KLW. We got him a job at Equinox, which is a fitness center where he works 3 hours a day, where he delivers and restocks towels throughout the club, picks up dirty towels and takes them to the laundry. Then he also does he cleans the yoga mats, sterilizes the yoga mats, and he's working on Let's Get Lost. So what to do if he gets lost is on Tuesday mornings before he goes to work. And Evie's Garden, we were like, you need to get outside and do something physical so that you don't gain weight. So we were like, what would that be? And he said he liked gardening and he likes to see things grow. So we put him in the Evie's Garden with the San Francisco Park and Recs department. They have a huge nursery where they grow the plants that go into Golden Gate Park. So he goes to Golden Gate Park and helps at Evie's Garden. Family House is it's connected with Benioff Children's Hospital, and it's where it's kind of a Ronald McDonald House, and it's where families go when when their children are going through therapies or surgery or treatment at Benioff Children's Hospital. So it's a massive apartment complex, and everything needs to be sterilized. And he said he wanted to give back, and he wanted to help other kids with leukemia, since that was something he experienced. And then Fridays he goes to the Jewish Contemporary Museum, and he works in the Kochek, and hangs out with, as he said, with my Hebrews, is what he calls them. So he goes to the Jewish Contemporary Museum, and he's working on number skills and hanging up in his customer service types of things, and it's great. And then you can see on Saturday, one of the things that we are trying to get him to do is to, not just sit home and watch sports on TV, but to call Tim and Jackie, two of his friends, and go to a basketball court that is over by Tim's house, and to shoot hoops. So we're teaching them how to get together and how to do that. And as they get to do that, what we do is we kind of, Tim is very good at kind of initiating those things. So we kind of charge him with getting the group together and calling them up and really pestering them to make them come, and then having them do that. And once you get it kind of built into their schedule, we fade back and they do that independently, and that's why we call it kind of a Saturday suggestion. And then on Sunday he goes to the gym with his dad, and I think he also goes on Wednesday nights too. So this is Jeff's schedule, and you can see well-rounded, lots of things that he's interested in, things that he can connect with, things that are all about him. And with that schedule is all of those groups like KLW, Let's Get Lost, Evie's Garden, and Family House. There's a couple people there. And other people are there, like Family House. They learn to vacuum. They learn to wipe a table down. They're learning all sorts of independent living skills. So some people are there to learn that. He is there because he wants to give back. He wants to help kids with leukemia. So the reasons you go to some of these things will be very, very different. And the reason why, what makes it meaningful for Jeff, might not make it meaningful for the other, for the other individual or the other 2 or 3 individuals in the group. For them, it might be a different reason. And we use the environments to really get at that. And you can teach a lot of different things. So like at the YMCA, we have some people one young woman who's into childcare, and she works up in the childcare center. She doesn't go to the YMCA to work out. She volunteers in the childcare center. And another person is volunteering at the front desk because we're working on range of motion and greeting people. And so he takes IDs and files them, and then gives people towels and locker locks. And he sits at the front desk with, the YMCA staff person and does this. And then we have another 2 people who are actually participating in one of their classes, in their Zumba class. And they're going there to actually utilize the YMCA. So you can go for a variety of reasons, and people can be, out of place for a variety of reasons. But what you want to, again, do is, why is it meaningful for this person to be in this environment, and what are we teaching that person that's meaningful to them? So again, be the connector, don't be the connection. So we try to make sure that we make friends everywhere we go, and we make sure that that home base is where we start. We teach people to go from their house to these places, because again, we don't want them to learn to go from WorkLink or from a center, or to bring them and congregate them someplace and then bring them out there, because they won't be able to do it without us. So we really work on going from their home to these sites, so that they can say, oh my God, I can get there on my own. I know how to get to the mall. I know how to get in the movie theaters there, and I can go on Saturday with my friends and go see a movie. So it's all about home is home base. The other thing we try to do is find commonalities, as I said, trying to make connections with people in the community, and so and so likes to fish, and just bringing things up about them that people may not bring up about themselves, so that people can, like, oh my God, I like to fish too. Where do you go? And then they start to make friends. So really looking at finding those commonalities between the individuals we serve and the community, and then starting conversations and stepping away, and getting out of the picture. So when we start a conversation, then usually what the community instructor does is, oh, I gotta go to the bathroom, or I'm gonna go make a phone call, and that silence, they start the conversation and then they kind of peel themselves out, and that silence is uncomfortable. And what we find is that the community person will usually start to fill it, or the individual themselves may start piping up and talking a little bit. But if the community instructor is there, everybody's going to wait for them to start the conversation and to make and manage the conversation. So when we start these conversations, we teach our community instructors to really kind of step away and find ways not to be needed. Using technology. If someone is on a bus route and they're learning to do something, they're learning a new route. One of the things that we'll do is we'll put a triptych on their phone with pictures of landmarks, so that they stay focused on where am I, and where is this bus now, so I know when to get off, so that it's not the community instructor saying, oop, here we go, pull the cord, you're getting off, but that it's them. So they swipe as they see, oh, there's the McDonald's, then they swipe that picture. What am I looking for next? I'm looking for this mall. Oh, there it is. Swipe, and then on to the next one. So using technology and natural supports and building those in is really important. One of the other things that we really look at is, with rural and urban communities, obviously the lifestyle and sense of community is very different. In a rural community, everybody knows your business, and everybody knows you, and everybody knows your so-and-so's son or daughter, and the sense of community is very different. In an urban setting, there's a lot more anonymity, and there's a lot of little tribes that people belong to. So, people have, this is the group that I do this with, this is the group that I do that with. So we try to look at, the lifestyle and the sense of the community, and where do people socialize and what do people do, can be very, very different. Obviously, the resources available are going to be different. In rural settings, there aren't going to be the public services and nonprofits galore. People are always like, well, yeah, Sarah, you can do this, because in San Francisco you can throw a rock and hit a nonprofit, and it's true. I think I could. So there are a million nonprofits. So we have a really easy, when we want to look at volunteering someplace, we can just literally, we can find anything. And I was, I'm being facetious, but I told somebody, yeah, there's probably if we wanted to find a weasel rescue, we could probably find one. There's a nonprofit for everything. So, it's really easy for us to find a way to connect people to a new tribe, so to speak. In rural communities, what you're really looking at is how to connect them, and where do people socialize. And what we see is a lot of rural settings, you have to be very creative, or you have to look at where people do socialize, or where people do community service, and it's usually through a service organization like Kiwanis, or the Lions Club, or whatever, and that's a community in and of itself. So a lot of rural communities are connecting people to those service organizations, because that's where services happen. So the person's involved in helping to organize the Shriners 4th of July parade. They're one rural community in let me see. Yeah. So one of the things that people, what we try to do is to really wait. Okay. So really looking at where do people socialize, and then the other thing that's really different with the urban and rural is the anonymity. In an urban setting. So teaching people safety and teaching people to really look out for themselves is really important. In a rural community, everybody's looking out for you, and knows your business, like it or not. In one of the people who my old boss, Rich Luking, moved to a small town in West Virginia, and he said that there was a young man who had Down syndrome, and in this town there was no town, there was a stop sign, and there was a gas station, and he said he used the gas station as a bus stop, and he would sit on a milk crate, and he said he saw this guy with Down syndrome, and he was kind of like, oh, what's going on here? Because he, of course, works in the field and was kind of like, curious. And what he realized is that people would stop and like, hey, John, get in. And they'd take him to wherever where are you going today? And they were like, get in, I'll give you a ride. So there was no buses, but this is his mode of transit. So he would constantly see him at this bus stop. So with rural settings, one of the things that you have to do is you have to be creative, and you have to look at what are the resources and what are the ways that you can utilize those resources. So I'm working with a group in Wisconsin, Headwaters in Rhinelander, and they had a young woman, and they were like, okay, so Sarah's telling us that you have to give back, and so they said to this young woman, how can you give, what about you? What do you want to do? And she was not that interested. She didn't want to work at the library. She didn't, there were all the things that they had in Rhinelander. She was like, nope, not interested. Don't like it. Nope. And so they said, well, you have to give back. You have to do something valued. What can it be? What do you like? She said, well, I love the color purple. And they were like, oh, okay. So they said to her, well, all right, so what do you do with that? And they were kind of racking their brains about, what could they do with the color purple in, Rhinelander. So, obviously in San Francisco, we'd probably have a nonprofit for the color purple, but they didn't in Rhinelander. So she said, well, I could sell purple things and give the money to the women's shelter. And they were like, that's beautiful. Okay, so let's do that. And what are you going to sell? And so they kind of charged her with. So and where are you going to sell it? So they figured out where they could sell things. The Walmart allows people that are raising money for good causes to set up a table outside of the Walmart, and they can get, they can sell their Girl Scout cookies or whatever it is. So they once a month signed her up that she was going to come and do a purple sale, and that she was going to donate all of the proceeds to the women's shelter. So they started her doing this, and the first, she had to come up with what she was going to do. So she was a knitter, so they helped her to, kind of purchase some yarn, purple yarn, and she made purple scarves and hats. She made purple cupcakes. She, doing simple things like this. So she started this purple sale, and she started collecting things that were purple, and people started, kind of, and then she took the money and gave it to the women's shelter, and so this went on for like 2 or 3 times, and then people started coming up to her and calling her the purple lady, and they started donating. How can I donate purple things? Or here, can I donate purple yarn to you? Can I do this? So, and then one woman said, I want to help. I want to help you do this. And she said, I love purple too. And she said, I want to help you run your purple sale. So she had this new friend, and together they would run this and kind of hang out, and she would take the money to the women's shelter, and the women's shelter at one point had the little Rhinelander newspaper come and take her picture. So suddenly she was, on the front page of the Rhinelander newspaper for all of the things that she was doing. And she now has a persona in the city of, or not city, but the town of Rhinelander, being the purple lady. So very creative, and not something that was available. The other thing in Provo, in Utah, they had a young woman who loved kids, and she lived in the middle of nowhere and in this kind of suburban town, and there were no daycares or anything around her neighborhood that she could really easily get to. So they said, well, maybe there's a diaper drive that LDS, the church, did, and she was very active in her church, and they said, well, why don't you participate in the diaper drive? Why don't you be a site, but why don't you also help organize it? So they got her on the committee for this diaper drive, and there was a group of about 7 women who were running it, and she now has 7 new friends, and she sits on this committee, and it goes kind of year round. They meet kind of on a quarterly basis, and she's also a designated site for the drop-off, so she has to learn customer service skills around, when people bring donations. She also has to chronicle what comes in, and then also has to kind of arrange for pickup and other things. So she's managing this diaper drive in her out of her garage, and then also participating in actually making it happen. And again, she's developed new friends around that. And I talked a little bit about the Kiwanis Club, getting people involved in that. Very, very good, because it also gives them a professional network, because many of the people that are involved in the Kiwanis are employers, or the Chamber of Commerce. Getting involved in the Chamber of Commerce with your organization and having a self-advocate go along is another good idea. But the Kiwanis do all sorts of service things in their communities, and this young man participates. Like the last thing that he did was they had they set up a new park, and the Kiwanis paid for all of the equipment, and as a group went and helped to install it. And he went along on that Saturday and helped to build this little park and very proud of what he did. And so another way to really give back and to create a sense of community. Another thing in Cincinnati, there's a Starfire, a program there, has in their suburb, they were like, there is no community. Everybody leaves town and goes, everybody leaves the small town and goes to Cincinnati for work, and then they come back and they go into their house, and nope, there was no sense of community. So one of the people in Starfire took it upon himself to create a community garden and neighborhood potluck dinners in the neighborhood, so that there was a community event, because there were none. And it's amazing what has happened, and you should go to their website and see some of the stories that have come out of that. And the newest, the community started really enjoying this, so then they started creating other community events. So there's one on, I think it's called Bourbon and Cigar Night, and a bunch of guys get together and they smoke cigars and drink bourbon in somebody's garage. So it's really kind of spiraled into creating a sense of community in a suburban area where there was none prior. So really get creative if you live in a place and where there's not public services. You may have to create some. The other thing that people have done, which I think is really inspiring, is to look at where do people socialize, and oftentimes it's the high school. It's around the high school basketball team or the high school football team. So making sure that person is connected and can go cheer on the local teams, and you can again build connections that way. So purposeful, goal-oriented services, it's all about skill building. Oh, yikes. So it's all about teaching. We're not doing outings or field trips. It's not predetermined by the staff. You don't have people come in and here are your 3 options today, pick one. It's all predetermined, as you saw with Jeff's schedule. He goes to the same places with the same group so that they get to know their names and they get to know who they are. So KLW is Jeff and 3 other individuals, and it's not a random array of people. We're really trying to make connections, and that doesn't come if it's new people every time, or they don't get to see them on a weekly basis. So really make sure that you're not predetermining this. It's not about being an outing or a field trip. You're really, why is it meaningful for this individual, and this is what we're going to do. And what are the goals and where can we teach that? Again, I think I kind of covered that. Repetitive practice, making sure that the individual goes more than once, because the first time you go, they're scared, they're unsure. The second time, they kind of get a little handle on what's going on. They know who, and by the third time, somebody knows their name. They start to feel comfortable. They start to get good at it. They start to like it. Okay, so building meaningful community services, how do you start? You really start by mapping what's available, what's out there, and really identifying the resources that you have that you can tap. So everything from community swimming pools to nonprofits to, meeting spots. Where would that be? You know, the Starbucks, we love Starbucks, they're on every corner. You know, assessing each individual's community skills and then grouping individuals according to commonalities, goals, or skills they need to learn. You know, why would we send someone here and, oh, Johnny needs to learn this, he can go along there and learn it there. You know, and everybody's working on different aspects when they're there. It's not all, you know, all one cookie cutter, everybody's doing this and everybody's coming here for this reason. So create consistent weekly schedules. And then the last piece is to collect data. When you're teaching, again, we use positive instructional strategies, error-free learnings. You really make sure that they don't make a mistake and build that in. So we prompt the correct response and then, you know, fade as they learn. Focus on the outcomes we want to see, and then, you know, how do we get there? As they say, there's a million ways to skin a cat. So you got to kind of figure it out. You know, is there a better way? Is there a more efficient way? Is there a way that this person can do it? So really, to get that same outcome. We look at accommodations and really challenging the learners, you know, making sure that they're doing things as independently as possible, and kind of stepping back and giving them time to respond. That's one of the biggest mistakes I see with community instructors and job coaches is that they interrupt, they hover, they bombard the person with verbiage, and the person, you know, is trying to answer their question, and they don't give them enough time to kind of process and to react. So step back, don't hover, don't overhelp. And the other piece is collecting data, measuring what's happening and making sure that the teaching you're doing is effective. Systematic instruction is a really important thing, and you know, obviously today we don't have time to get into it, but task analysis is a great piece, and that's really breaking tasks down into teachable steps and really defining, you know, how you're going to teach it and what you're going to call things, and how you're going to approach it, and making sure that every community instructor is using that task analysis in the very same way and understands that, you know, we're going to, because if you have 2 or 3 community instructors and they're, you know, kind of rotating through, or if someone steps in for somebody and they teach it a different way, or they call something else, you know, I'm calling it a whatchamacallit, you're calling it a widget, the person's not going to know what you're talking about. Or if you do something a different way, you know, the person's going to be very, very confused. So we use task analysis to kind of lock things in, but we also use them to document progress and the level of instruction that we're providing. And what we see with these task analyses is you'll see the small improvements. People with cognitive disabilities make small progress. So we use these to really make sure that people are making progress, and that our teaching is effective. Or if there is trouble, you know, we need to look at, you know, can we make an accommodation and can we fix it? So here's street crossing. This is a street crossing task analysis. And again, you asked about, one of the questions was, you know, how do we convince parents? And one thing to really look at is qualitative versus quantitative data. You know, us going in and saying Johnny knows how to cross the street because we've taken log notes for 6 months that say Johnny did good today, Johnny crossed the street safely, versus this. This is data you can see down at the bottom, level of independence, 10, 18, 18, 30. You can see that Johnny's learning, but he's not quite there yet. And we show this to parents when it's 100% for 6 months and say Johnny can cross the street, and here's the data to prove that. They know we're not winging it. They know we're not just kind of, you know, watching him once and, oh yeah, that's good. Because again, this is really an important one and really demonstrates the importance of taking data. So measuring success, how do you do that? You start with writing good objectives. Again, objectives are, you know, goals are a broad statement, and objectives are small, measurable aspects of that goal. And then what we do is make sure that there's a criteria for success. How do we know when it's done? Put some numbers on it, and based on the skills, not the services provided. You know, what is so you're really looking at the skill to teach, not, you know, what you don't want Johnny to do, or you're not looking at the services that you are giving that person, but what is the skill that person is learning? So what do those look like? So writing goals, you start with a definition of the situation. So in the aspect of Anna, she's collecting hangers at the Gap. We say, given a clipboard and a laminated checklist, the next part of the goal or objective would be the action or outcome we want to see. Anna will independently collect hangers from 3 sections of the store and replace the rolling racks. Again, the criteria, the performance level, that makes sense. Again, it is based on the skill that you're teaching. So 4 consecutive days worked might be something that's okay for collecting hangers. And if she did it 4 days in a row, we'd be like, okay, done. 85% independence is, not okay for street crossing. So you have to really kind of base the criteria on, will someone die? You're going to want to see 100% independence for a long time versus, 4 consecutive times that they do it. So, the criteria again is based on what the skill is that you're teaching, and is 100% necessary, right? So the other thing that we look at is, writing, these are poorly written objectives. Betty will learn to cook. So it's too broad. What does that mean? You can't really tell, and there's no criteria. There's no, when does Betty know how to cook? The other thing that, like the next one says, Tim will keep his job. That's kind of not very clear as to what that means or what skills he's going to need to do that, or what's going wrong and what's the issue and what is he working on. So you want to make sure that your objectives are very clear as to what the skill is that you want to see. One of the goals I always see is John will attend employment training class 2 times a week. That is what you are doing. Or Harry will participate in 3 community outings. So he's going out, but what is he learning is key. He's just because he steps outside the door, you could check a box and say, okay, he's been out. There's one. So, and then again, 3 community outings per year is not enough. That is not repetitive practice. That is not getting him out and making the connections. That is, 3 outings a year. So be clear with your goals. How often does this need to happen? And what are the skills that the person is learning? So if that will not bug her coworkers, that's what she's not going to do, but what do you want to see her do? Or Sam will work independently and quickly. What does working independently and quickly really mean? So here's some observable, measurable objectives. So given picture recipes, Betty will independently prepare 3 balanced, healthy meals for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. So you're kind of looking at that. Or at Cooking Group, Betty will use pot holders correctly and independently to remove hot trays or baking dishes from the oven 5 consecutive observations, right? And here, these are the other ones. So given an assigned project, Sam will independently gather his materials. So maybe he's not setting up, maybe he's not initiating doing, setting up his workspace or getting organized. So you would be looking at teaching him to do that without his supervisor stepping in. So independently gather needed materials and set up his workspace in an organized, efficient manner, 3 out of 4 projects. And then that 4th project, if he doesn't get it, you would want to make sure he's asking for help. Tim will independently greet his manager with a smile or a wave, 3 out of 4 work days. And again, 3 out of 4. You don't, maybe the manager's not there, maybe he doesn't do it one day, but no one's going to die if he doesn't independently greet his manager. So you don't really need 4 out of 4 to say that, he's worked this through and we can work on something else. So Harry will independently drive his chair into the wheel lock on the bus without hitting passengers 3 consecutive occasions. So you see how to write good goals. And then the data comes from that. You determine kind of your teaching strategies, you determine when the goals are met, when it's time to fade. Data is so important to give feedback to people and to really demonstrate to others, including family members, that they're competent and that, the small progress is really hard to see. And we often find community instructors saying, oh, they're just not getting it. And then when we look at it, at the data, we're like, they are getting it. And it's coming along slowly, but they're getting it, so you can kind of see those little breakthroughs. And again, the qualitative versus quantitative data, you really look at which is stronger. And I have to say the quantitative numbers, show me the numbers, it really speaks volumes versus just a log note. Johnny had a great day. So really look at, are you taking log notes and that's your daily documentation? And instead, could you shift it to being more of a task analysis? And can you look at, looking at taking data that's important? So collecting relevant data, what's needed, and how often. So maybe you don't do it every day because nothing's going to change that much. So maybe you do it, or every minute. So maybe you just do it a little bit once, maybe 10 minutes out of the day you collect data, or maybe once a week, kind of that probe. And then be careful not to aggregate the data too much, like pulling it all together and doing kind of a monthly rate. You're going to lose the detail, and you're not going to see, on Tuesdays there's a problem. He's not doing it on Tuesday, so you can see why. So be sure that you're collecting data and not aggregating it and bunching it too much. Keep it simple. Make sure you're spending your time teaching and not counting. Make it visual. Graphs are a great way to show people, and having people graph themselves is really a great way to provide immediate feedback to people. So critical goals, collecting data, street crossing versus greeting their coworkers. If it's a critical goal, it's going to have to be 100%, and and you're going to have data to show. Greeting coworkers, maybe you just make that a goal. Maybe there's, you can use a log note to collect that. And then again, who collects it? We try to make the person responsible for evaluating their own performance, because then it's a very effective teaching strategy. So here's some goal sheets that show you some data, and then also the graph that goes along with it. And that red line is the expectation. This is for packing orders at Gap, and the graph, and one of the things that we were looking at was time, and are they doing it quickly? And we said to the manager, how many orders per minute do you want to see, or a 10-minute period? And she said, well, and so we figured out a way to kind of make that happen and graph it, and the individual put his information in, and it quickly impacted his performance and his speed. So here's some other ways of collecting data. You can see typing speed and cleaning exam rooms, and this is, provides feedback to someone, and I'm getting this, I'm really getting good. Okay, and again, we talked about task analysis is also a really great tool. So this is for scanning documents, and again, you can kind of see how that works, and you can immediately see where the teaching is still needed. You can see where to step back. You can see where the person's being independent. Again, self-monitoring, making sure that people collect data on their own performance is really kind of key, and making sure that they're really recording what they're learning, and that is very, very reinforcing too when they start to see. So this is a cooking group data sheet, and you can see that this is something that Tim would carry, and he would write when he had cooking group. We'd make him put the date in, and then what did he have an opportunity to do, and did he do it independently? Then he gets to put a plus. Did he need support? Then he has to put a minus. And then what we can see is, if he's using a can opener and has a bunch of pluses, then he doesn't use the can opener anymore, and he's got that. Then the community instructor makes sure he moves on and he does something more intense or more challenging. Working out at the gym, some people carry things, their weight charts or their fitness cards, and we laminate these so they can take them around on a little clipboard if they want. And then we help them to kind of organize their workouts so that they don't just go in and do 2 or 3 of this and 2 minutes on the bicycle and I'm done. So we make them actually do 30 minutes on a treadmill, bicycle, or elliptical, whatever they choose, or if there's one specific one that they need to, we would kind of lock that in, and at what speed and how many minutes today did you do, and then we encourage them to go beyond that 30 minutes, and then you can graph that. Or the weight machines, you can see that they do 4 repetitions at what weight. And then again, many of the people that we work with are pre-diabetic or a little overweight, and so one of the things that this young man, it was kind of critical that he lose weight because of his diabetes. So we are working on that, and he is monitoring this and filling it out. So he weighs himself once a month and keeps track of that. We have them carry their worksheets and their data sheets and their positive personal profiles, so that if we learn something about them, in individual binders, and then they also have their work tools, so if they have a checklist or anything like that. And the other thing that goes in there is their weekly schedule. So where are they supposed to be and with who? And some of them love these binders and really love to carry them and love to record their progress, and other ones lose them every week. So it's really kind of dependent on who or what. And for the ones that lose them every week, we tend to kind of help them with that, and maybe the community instructor carries their data sheets. So success in the community, when do we know we're done, and when to fade? We measure the important outcomes. We really look at, are people being independent, and community engagement are the two things that we came up with as something that is critical. How do we know when WorkLink services are not needed anymore, or how do we know when it's time? We also look at, people's success in employment. Are they working to their full potential? Are they working at a, good wage? Are they financially secure? Happiness is another thing you could look at how to measure, and are they happy? It's a little nebulous, a little hard, but I'm sure that people can figure out a way. And then also one of the things that we said that's really important with these community program settings is number of friends. How many friends do you have that are not paid staff? And that was something that was very telling. So we actually asked people to name their friends each year, and at first it was just the community instructors. They would come up with the community instructors or their job coach or whatever, and it was all work linkers. And what we see over the course of our services is that suddenly they're talking about their neighbor as their friend, or suddenly the guy at the corner store is their friend, or the people at the nonprofit that they volunteer at. There's a couple people there that they mention as friends. And then what we see is they start to do things with these people, or coworkers. So we really try and encourage that, encourage the idea that, WorkLink is not their friends, and that their friends are out there, and let's go meet them. One of the things that we also, we were trying to figure out is how do we really document the progress of an individual. So we use a scatter plot, which is a graphing tool where you visually represent two factors, but normally they use it to correlate the factors, and we're not really correlating the factors. We're just looking at, we want to visually see where they are in employment, which is one of the levels. The level of employment is really important to us. Are they volunteering, or are they working? And then if they're working, how much support do they need? And then, are they working to their full potential? So the other thing that we want to look at is community engagement and level of independence in the community, and that was a tough one. How do we measure that? So I was kind of kicking this around, and what we came up with was two different graphs. The first one is the individual, and we'll talk later about the programmatic one. But we graphed an individual's level of independence and level of employment when we do our intake, and then prior to their annual planning meeting each year. And here's what it looks like. So we have found that this is a great way to really motivate people, and to really, and again, if they're having difficulties getting the parents to agree to something, we had a young man who, we were looking at him traveling independently, and we had gotten him to the point where he knew it, and we knew it, and he knew he could do it, and his parents said no. And so we had him on his skills assessments. That's what this is. So this is the level of community engagement, and what we're looking at is that aggregate score down at the bottom, right? But one of the things was taking traveling independently in the community on the bus, and he was constantly getting ranked 4, travels independently, ranked 4, and he was like, I'm a 5, and we were like, no, the community instructor is still shadowing you. You're a 5 when you go independently. And he spun on his mom, and he said, I'm a 5 and I could do this by myself. And his mother finally relented and said, okay. So that's I think a really great use of this, and the other really great use is that we can kind of see, you know, from intake, are people starting to move along this continuum, and are they moving along this continuum? And our goal is, of course, to have 5 5s. And at that point, what we can say is work-linked services are no longer needed. This person is very independent and very capable. So here's our level of independence for employment. You can see a 1, you know, 100% support in community-based volunteer jobs. 2 to 3 hours a stretch, building stamina. 3 is where the money starts. So this is a paid position. They're employed and they're you know, getting a high degree of support. 4 is less support in a paid job, and then 5 is a pretty high bar. So able to work very independently, earning a livable wage, financially stable, needs just follow-on support 25% or less, check-in in random situations. Able to advocate effectively for themselves, attends work events with coworkers with little or no support from staff. So that's a 5 in employment. And then we use this tool to do the level of community engagement. And again, those graphs are done at intake and then right before their annual review, where we will actually look at completing this again and putting that graph together. So that's it. So you can see that there's lots of different ways to collect data. There's lots of different ideas and lots of different things that you could do in meaningful ways in the community. So let's use the last 15 minutes for questions. And
Yep, we have one question again from Joanne, who also says, again, this is great, and you are observing social capital in action. One of the problems I see here are the culture and expectations of staff and or the potential work volunteer site who have a hard time seeing the potential in individuals or really moving into a strategy where the individual really is leading the show. Could you please talk about how you help staff and potential work site volunteer sites to come around and use this approach as opposed to what they have done before and their low expectations of people with disabilities?
it's all about training. Again, it's just you have to really teach your staff that they are not caretakers and that they're teachers, not caretakers, and that you want them challenging the learner. So really teaching them teaching skills, so that systematic instruction is so key, and that, you know, you're really trying to fade. The other thing that we try to do is it's a very different job than a facility-based production floor supervisor. You know, it's all about making widgets and we're getting this contract done, and you know, they're all about the work. They're all about, you know, the bag and rice or whatever it is. So what you need to do is you really need to find networkers and connectors instead of production supervisors, and it's a very different skill set. It's a very different attitude, and you know, really making sure you got the right people on the bus is a good start. But you know, people can learn. It is a very different job, so you got to teach them to step back. You got to teach them to initiate these social contexts. That social valuation training is a really great one. There's a OFL, I forgot what it stands for, but there's an online training that really focuses on, you know, getting people to understand the reasons and the philosophies behind these services. And again, it's not about bag and rice. It's about, you know, making connections and really building friendships and skills. So yeah.
There's another question about data. I think you did touch on this a little bit, but the question is basically about the importance of having both quantitative and qualitative data as being important. The numbers show if you're moving toward the goal, but the log notes and other qualitative data explain why. Please explain if you use both kinds of data. And you kind of alluded to that with not aggregating data, but maybe if you have anything else to add there.
Right. No, we do. We have a little, you know, it's kind of a combination of both. There's a case note section of our daily documentation. So we record attendance, we record the, did they work on their goals, and then there's a log notey sheet, but we also back it up with these task analysis and other things. And then if you've got kind of a combo where the person is collecting their own data as well, you have that in there. So yeah, it's a combination of everything, and what's most important is to collect the data that's relevant and not to have people write log notes when, you know, something like a task analysis is more useful, and it's going to get at the detail that you need. You know, because you don't want one for street crossing. You don't want 100,000 log notes that someone has to pick through to see if there's any sort of pattern, or if, you know, if there's a chronic issue or chronic need. If you have to read 50,000 log notes, it's going to take you a long time, and it's going to be hard to see, as I said, those patterns, or whether the person's learning if you've got, you know. And then also just the quality of log notes is really, you know, a lot of them are, Johnny had a great day and he worked on this. You know, they're not writing what is necessary. They're not writing, you know, what's important, and they're not getting at kind of the, you know, meat on the bones as to why you're there. So we try not to use log notes, but we do have one, and people use them for those random things, like, you know, so and so, you know, for case notes, or for you know, those one-off things, like, you know, or to really pull out when someone does something, like today somebody initiated this all on their own without me, kind of, you know, those kinds of things get flagged. So we do have, you know, a little combo situation going on, I guess.
That's great. There's a question from Sherry who asks, is there a particular level of functioning that people in your program have? Are there people in your program who are nonverbal or using disposable undergarments?
Yes. We have, what you want to make sure is that you're balancing your groups, a third, a third, and a third. So a third of the people in the program have, and this is how we've done it too, because we didn't want to make this program just for people who, you know, with moderate or mild disabilities and getting them out there. So what we do is we have a third of the people in the program they will never cross the street safely. They need support to be out in the community. And then a third of the people in the program have moderate disabilities and need, you know, a little longer learning period to get kind of off the ground or going, and then, you know, there might be some independence in there. And then we have a third of the people who have more mild support needs, who they just need to get started, and, you know, and just need a little encouragement, and, you know, a couple skills brushed up, and they're off and running. And then we work on them on initiating and those kind of, you know, right before we fade out, can you do this independently kind of stuff. So yes, we do have a few people, a third of the people in the program have kind of significant support needs, but not, we do not have a facility, so we can't work with people who are medically fragile. So they have to, you know, unfortunately, we don't have a facility. We're 100% community-based, so we have no place to kind of take people back to if necessary. So we have had people with behavioral issues, and, you know, what I see is they have behavioral issues because they didn't like what they were doing, and when you start to help them to do the things that they do like, and you start to really listen to them, those behaviors really tend to melt away. So you know, we have had people who needed a one-on-one with behavioral issues, and then over time they're now in a small group with, you know, completely supported by in a 3-to-1, 4-to-1 ratio. So yeah, I encourage people to really kind of balance that, because if you have a program that serves only medically fragile people, you're going to have a hard time getting all those people out, and then those one-on-one aides really peel that back, because oftentimes the aides feel like, you know, it's my job to help this person, so they overhelp. So really getting them to step away and stand away is kind of critical.
There was a question about the community skills assessment tool, and can you confirm, Sarah, if that's different than the one that you presented last time?
Nope, that's the same one.
It's the same one. Okay, so Mark, there's a copy of the community skills assessment tool on our DDA website, along with the webinar that was archived last time. So if you go there, you'll be able to download a copy of that tool. Mark also asks, on slide 47, I understand that the x-axis comes from this tool, but what is the measurement instrument for the y-axis employment?
That is the level of independence. So what we're looking at is the level of employment. So level 1 So a person would be a 1 if they had 100% support and community-based and they were working in volunteer settings, and the community instructor was providing a high degree of instruction and support, hand-over-hand instruction, partial participation. That would be a 1. And again, the 5 I read, and the other ones kind of fall in between. And a level 3, so a person can't get to be a level 3 until they are employed in a paid situation. So that's how we kind of decided what the level of independence and the level of employment would be. So
Mark said thank you for that. We have a question. Wendy asks, we talked a lot about establishing supports in the community, but we have found that there are a lot of people not necessarily open to working with our individuals or engaging with them. What has been done in terms of educating the community or preparing them to receive our individuals?
Can you repeat that? Sorry.
Sure, and I have a few thoughts on that as well. We talked a lot about establishing supports in the community, but we found that there are a lot of people not necessarily open to working with our individuals or engaging with them. What has been done in terms of educating the community or preparing them to receive our individuals?
You know, one of the things that we've seen is that it's kind of that fear factor on both sides. People are afraid to go into the community, and the community is afraid to engage with people with disabilities because they're not familiar. So that giving back, that opportunity to play a valued role is so critical. And we've seen again and again that if we take people out and they are confident and they're appropriate, and they're learning to be in the community in a socially valued way, and taking pride in that fear factor on their side goes away. But what we also see is when the community sees them being independent and capable young adults and participating in a productive, valued way in the community, they learn to communicate and learn to not fear or think that someone with a specialized degree has to engage with this person. So we see that melts away too. And it's funny because many times in the provider agencies that I've worked with, I've gone in and the provider agencies are like, people don't like us in the community. And I said, you know what they don't like? They don't like vans of 30 people showing up, overwhelming the situation and the environment. So one of the things that you have to be very careful of is that you get down to small groups, and that you go out in manageable groups, and that you hold the individuals in the group accountable for acting in socially appropriate ways, and not let them get away with being goofy or disruptive in any way, shape, or form. And then the other thing to really focus in on is that you're helping people to warm up and find those commonalities, and helping people to see them not as a person with a disability, but by their talents. So really working with them to see that person as a fitness nut too, or he's someone that loves to play the guitar. People are like, oh my God, you play the guitar? So that's where the connections come from, is when they start to see people not by their disability, but what their skill sets are. So that's another critical piece of kind of building these connections. What do you think, Stacey?
No, you summed it up beautifully. I just want to echo, and you talked about this earlier, that your support staff are not the connection, but they're the connectors. So it's a two-way connection. So I find that often a community member is going to react in a more positive manner if there's a real purposeful, meaningful reason that there's going to be an interaction, and if that connector can be there to help navigate through the whole thing and then help fade away, it makes much more sense than exactly what you just said. Then there's a big van that pulled up with lots of people and we're here. That's a very different experience. And
the dump and run, like you said, that fading back and not expecting that people are going to be comfortable right out of the gate.
And this could be a new experience for a community member who may not have ever known a person with a disability, and so there may be fear associated with what is that person's role, what should I know, what do I need to know. And so I think just all of that has to be done on a very individualized basis. It's not something that you can kind of mass communicate, really. There's no way around the individualized approach. And I think that once you take that approach, things, and there will always be, you know, community members that maybe aren't the nicest community
Right.
members, but
Right.
that's
They're out there.
true for all of us.
And
Right.
don't, you know, and use it as an opportunity to educate them. But, you know, we don't, you know, go after people who are nasty. We just kind of say, we tell the person in the program, you know, that person's an asshole. You know, sorry for my French. But, you know, they're out there. They're out there. And but it's funny because many of the providers that I've worked with across the country, and the one in Rhinelander, when I first started working with them, they were like, you know, our community really likes us in here, is what one of the people said. And I said, I think you're going to be really surprised. And I saw her last month at the Wisconsin First Employment First conference in Wisconsin, and she came up to me and said, that was the silliest thing I ever said. And she said, our community has embraced us wholeheartedly, you know, once we started going out in small numbers and to do things in a purposeful way, you know, she said, and to give back and all that stuff. She said, it's just been amazing. And she said she's really been floored by the people who want to get involved and the people who, you know, love to participate in supporting and you know, encouraging the individuals in their program. So it's doable.
It's great. We do not have any other questions.
Okay. There's some additional resources at, you know, following those links, people can follow those, and there's the Lead Center has lots and lots of stuff. And then, of course, the Community of Practice has webinars that people can participate in, and all you have to do is kind of register using this little link here, and you can get on their mailing list. Okay, the next one that we have scheduled is going to be managing community-based services and staff. How do you keep things moving? How do you get things organized? And that's going to be, we said, July 20th, 1 to 3.
Great.
Right. There's my contact information if anybody has any other additional questions on today's webinar.
Okay, great. That was perfect timing, Sarah. Thank you so much, and we'll look forward to hearing from you again next month.
Okay, very good.
Thanks, everybody. Have a great weekend.
Thanks. Bye-bye, everyone.